I know Fran Brown indicated that they haven't even reached out to Conner Weigman from the transfer portal, but I think they are interested.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, I was planning to do a full 30-minute-ish podcast on Conner Weigman, the transfer portal quarterback from Texas A&M. I had been teasing him for a while. I was going to do a similar show to Kaidon Salter from yesterday, but things kind of changed at Fran Brown's press conference. So before we can actually talk about Conner Weigman, the transfer portal quarterback from Texas A&M, we have to actually decipher if Syracuse is interested in him. Okay, so that's what's coming up on the podcast. I'm also going to give you guys a brief bio of Conner Weigman. I'm going to tell you guys the pros and cons of him, essentially. And then at the end of the podcast, Conner Weigman or Kaidon Salter, which one do you prefer? I'm going to give you my thoughts on it later on in the show. And before that, I mean, honestly, before even hearing that, you can leave a comment in the comment section below. Let's assume that they're interested in both. Okay, who would you prefer if you were making the choice? Kaidon Salter from Liberty or Conner Weigman from Texas A&M? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Before we get to everything, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So Fran Brown, Syracuse football's head coach, he had a press conference today, and he had a lot of comments. All right. I heard the stuff about the transfer portal and someone in the program, I don't know who it was, clearly entered in, I guess, the wrong fashion. And Fran Brown essentially referred to that player as a snake. That's a kind of harsh comment to make, but Fran Brown's pretty blunt. We've learned that about him over the course of the year that he's been with Syracuse. He also didn't really confirm that Kyle McCord was going to play in the bowl game, but based on what he said, it's highly likely that McCord does, because Fran was pretty adamant about no opt-outs and the fact that it's an extra game and that NFL opportunity, it's another game to play, right? So I think that Kyle McCord will play. So I guess that is news. But for the purposes of this podcast, which we're talking about Conner Weigman here, there's one quote that really caught my eye from it, okay? And it comes from Ashley Wenstowski, who tweeted out that Fran Brown says he has not spoken to former Texas A&M quarterback Conner Weigman, who is in the transfer portal. For those that are watching this on YouTube, I have put it up on the screen for you guys to read. If you are listening to this podcast, I'll repeat it. Fran Brown says he has not spoken to Texas A&M quarterback Conner Weigman, who is in the transfer portal. Okay, before we get to is Syracuse actually interested in him, here's a little bit about Conner Weigman, okay? He's 6'3", he's 230 pounds, he's from Texas A&M, he's a former 5-star recruit in 2022, and he would have 2 years of eligibility left. For what it's worth, here are his career numbers. 365 career passes, 2,600 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Pretty good numbers, if you ask me, over the course of 365 pass attempts. On 3, connected Syracuse and Weigman as a potential fit in the transfer portal. As I stated on yesterday's podcast talking about Kaidon Salter, when On 3, a major recruiting site, is connecting to a school and a player together, they're not just pulling it out of a hat. They're getting that information from somewhere. They have sources, okay? So someone is feeding them information. And lo and behold, the next day it comes out, which is today, that Kaidon Salter is visiting Syracuse. Look at that, right? He was connected to the program, and now there's a visit coming. Conner Weigman connected to Syracuse. However, Fran Brown in the press conference, as I just read to you, says they haven't contacted him. So what's the holdup here? What's going on? If you just look at that quote, and I admit I did at first because I didn't watch the press conference live. I had to go back and watch it. I kind of was like, I'm kind of surprised by that. Really? They haven't even reached out to him, not even as like a feeler. I mean, you might not really want him as your plan A, but he's certainly got to be like a plan B or a plan C at quarterback for next season or 2 seasons. So I was curious, and I listened to what Fran Brown said, and I'll paraphrase it for you, okay? Fran Brown essentially indicated that Weigman is not in the transfer portal, or at least that's when he was speaking in the press conference. Now, I did read a report from the Houston Chronicle saying that Conner Weigman is now officially in the transfer portal. But at the time that Fran Brown was speaking to the media, he might not have officially been in the portal, which simply means he cannot admit publicly whether or not they have contacted him. Because until your name is officially in the database, it's in the transfer portal, you're still on your current school. You're still on your current team. It came out pretty early that Conner Weigman was planning to enter the transfer portal. Key word there is planning, because the portal didn't open up until midnight of December 9th. So really, I think it's just a technicality. I think that Conner Weigman at the time had not filled out maybe the paperwork or had not entered his name into the database. So technically, he wasn't in the portal. And so Fran Brown, in a public press conference, is not allowed to admit that they've spoken to him. Because if he does, that's tampering. That's an NCAA violation. Can't do it. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, why is it different than Kaidon Salter? Kaidon Salter might have just simply put his name in the hat right away. Now, I know that I'm guessing a little bit right now, but it makes sense. And it makes sense with what I'm about to tell you as well. Fran Brown, he actually admitted this in his press conference that if Weigman were to enter the transfer portal, wink, wink, they would reach out. There you go. There's interest, clearly. Because I guess Fran Brown's allowed to say that. Hey, I mean, if he enters the portal, we'll certainly be interested. I mean, sure, if, I don't know, who's a great player in college football that has another year of eligibility left? I don't know why I'm blanking, but you get the point. I mean, sure, if, let's say Cam Ward had another year of eligibility. Yeah, if he entered the portal, we'd happily want him, right? That's probably what Fran Brown was doing in his press conference. It's just that Conner Weigman had not officially entered, and so therefore, he can't admit publicly that they had contacted him, even though they had probably contacted him if they're interested. It's just that they can't admit it publicly because of tampering. There you go. I believe they are interested. I can't confirm it, but that's just my opinion. I think they are interested in Conner Weigman. To what extent? I don't know. Maybe it is their plan B. Maybe it's their plan C. Maybe it's just a feeler. Who knows? But there's got to be some sort of interest between Syracuse and Conner Weigman. On3 connected them together. And Fran Brown in his press conference admitted that if he were to enter the portal, we would reach out to him. There you go. So, I think we've established, in case you're someone that's a Conner Weigman truther, that I think the Orange are interested in him. So coming up, I'm going to tell you guys about him, a little bio, and also his scheme fit with Syracuse. And then later on in the podcast, Conner Weigman or Kaidon Salter. That's what's coming up next on the Locked On Syracuse podcast. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite, and right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com, plus score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. That's 50% off at OMAHA steaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply. Let's talk about Conner Weigman. We've already established that it's likely the Orange have interest in him. It's just that Fran Brown in his press conference could not publicly admit it. Okay? I think we've established that. There are 2 green flags. I guess we'll do green flags and red flags. We're going to take a little bit of dating, I guess, and put it into a Locked On Syracuse podcast. Green flag, red flag, right? We're going to talk about Conner Weigman. There are 2 green flags and 2 red flags. Let's start with the green. Let's start with positive, right? Number 1, he fits the scheme. He's 6'3", 230 pounds. Kyle McCord is 6'3", 210 pounds. Okay, so he's got about similar size. If you look at Conner Weigman's scouting report, they say he's got good arm strength. He's got good zip on the ball. The zip on the ball is really the thing that caught my eye because that's like Kyle McCord. That was the first thing I noticed about Kyle McCord when I watched him even in the spring game in April. It's just how he throws. It's like it's shot out of a cannon. And I would make the comparison back in April when I watched Syracuse's prior quarterback, and I don't mean to disrespect him, it was Garrett Schrader. He was okay. He was a very mobile guy. But when he threw the ball, he threw like a lollipop. That's kind of what it was. It was a lollipop. The best example, if you're really looking for a reference of someone who could be successful throwing lollipops, is Chad Pennington, actually. Chad Pennington was a guy who did not have a lot of zip, did not have a lot of arm strength, but he was accurate, at least. Clearly, I mean, he was in the NFL. He got to be accurate to some extent. When I watched Kyle McCord, he had that zip on the ball. It's the same thing, I guess, with Conner Weigman, and he fits the scheme. He's a pro-style quarterback. Pro-style. That means, hey, you could just plug and play him right into Jeff Nixon's offensive system, and it should work. He's accurate, short, intermediate, deep. He can make all the throws, and he's a little bit more mobile than Kyle McCord. So he fits the scheme. He's a big guy. Makes a lot of sense, right? He's got a lot of zip. Sounds good to me. Number 2, also similar to Kyle McCord, he's a former 5-star recruit. We saw with McCord the talent of a 5-star player. Not every 5-star is going to live up to their potential, but you always will see, not always, you will usually see glimpses of why someone is a 5-star player. A 5-star high school player is one of the, 20 best players in the country, give or take. It is incredibly difficult to be that highly rated in football, in an ESPN 300, or you get the point. It's so difficult to be a 5-star, more difficult than it is in basketball, because it's like the same amount of 5 stars in each sport, but there's a lot more players in football. He's a 5-star guy, and so he's clearly got talent. Okay, the talent just doesn't go away. It's whether or not it can be developed through coaching. It's whether or not the player wants it bad enough. Do they have the work ethic, the desire? But when you're a 5-star quarterback, you have a lot of talent. Conner Weigman is a 5-star player, just like Kyle McCord was in high school. And we saw what happened with Kyle McCord, how Syracuse was able to unlock it by putting him in the right system and giving him the right circumstances. All ACC second team. Look at that. So he's a former 5-star, and he fits the scheme. It's almost like you're putting in Kyle McCord 2.0. But there are some red flags. Just like Kaidon Salter, actually, he regressed in 2024. And it's not just from 2023, it's from 2022 as well. In 2022 and 2023, here were his combined numbers. He played in 9 games. In those 9 games, 1,800 yards, 16 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 62% completion rate. That's really good. I know it's only 9 games, but over 200 passing yards a game, 16-2 touchdown to interception ratio. I think we'd all take that. That's really, really good. But this past season, he plays in 6 games, and he throws for 800 total yards, which is well less per game than what he was averaging. It's like barely over 100 per game. 3 touchdowns in 6 games and 5 interceptions. Not great. Completion percentage, 56%. Oof. Not good. So clearly there's a red flag. There's clearly some sort of regression. But like Kaidon Salter, is there an explanation for this? It's Texas A&M, so I am not going to give him a personnel excuse. It's Texas A&M. They're always going to get good recruits. They're always going to get good transfers. No excuse with personnel. It's not Liberty football here. But I am willing to give Conner Weigman this. They completely changed their coaching staff from 2023 to 2024, and they changed their offensive system. So it's entirely possible that he couldn't adjust to a new scheme. And if he were to come to Syracuse, he's going to be put in a system already in place that should, in theory, work for a pro-style quarterback. But Texas A&M, it just wasn't a fit anymore. They changed coaches, and he regressed. The other red flag with Conner Weigman is this. He's got an injury history. That's a no-no. I don't like injury histories. Not good. He's dealt with a lot of them. I mean, just 2 off the top of my head that I wrote down. I mean, AC joint injury that caused him to miss 3 games this past season. Not great. He had a season-ending foot injury in 2023. So is he injury prone? Is he unlucky? Maybe the shoulder injury can explain why part of the regression happened. Because I believe he did come back from it briefly. I don't know. But he's got an injury history. And these are all questions that I have. So Conner Weigman, he's got a lot of talent. He's a 5-star player. He's a pro-style quarterback, so he already fits the scheme that's in place. But he clearly regressed this season, and he's got an injury history. There's green flags, red flags, pros and cons. No matter how you slice it, we're going to talk about this coming up. Kaidon Salter, Conner Weigman, there are pros and cons to both quarterbacks. There's no perfect quarterback prospect in the transfer portal for Syracuse football. At least any of them that they are connected to. These are the 2 ones that they are connected to right now. So coming up, let's do it. Let's talk about both of them. Would you prefer Conner Weigman or Kaidon Salter? That's coming up next on the Locked On Syracuse podcast. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Syracuse football is playing in the Holiday Bowl against Washington State on December 27th. FanDuel currently has the Orange as 6.5-point favorites, and Fran Brown said today that he doesn't want his players opting out. I don't think he can force them, but he doesn't want them opting out. And you can do with that information what you want. Okay? Is that meaning that Kyle McCord's going to play? I'm going to probably say yes, but it's not confirmed. If our players are playing, though, and assuming that Washington State's not having their quarterback because he's in the transfer portal, that bodes well for Syracuse. That's all I'm going to say. They're 6.5-point favorites. You can be the judge on those odds. It's still December 9th. There's 18 days until the bowl game. All you got to do is just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Conner Weigman or Kaidon Salter? Which do you prefer? Leave a comment in the comment section below. This is a very, very difficult choice for me. In theory, if everything were equal, I talked about it in a Poll Friday last week, actually. Poll Friday, which quarterback option I would prefer. And I would say one with 2 years plus of eligibility. Conner Weigman has 2+ years. Kaidon Salter has 1 year. If you get someone with 2+ years, you're not waiting for a quarterback in theory. You have to keep him next year as well from the portal. But in theory, you don't have to wait for a quarterback until 2027. Whereas if we get Kaidon Salter tomorrow, we're back in the same spot a year from now. What do we do at the quarterback position? Here's the deal. Okay, I'll do a whole comparison for you right now. They each have a common red flag, and that is that both players regressed from this season to last season. They were better in 2023 than they were in 2024. More comparisons, though, okay? Weigman has an injury history. Kaidon Salter, off the field issues. Okay, those are both red flags. They're two different red flags. Kaidon Salter, by all indications, he's healthy, but he's got off the field issues from 2021. Conner Weigman, I mean, maybe there's something that I am missing, but I don't think he has any sort of off-field problems, at least with law enforcement, but he's got an injury history. Scheme-wise, Conner Weigman, he currently fits the offensive system that's in place right now. He's a pro-style quarterback. He's very similar to Kyle McCord. But if Syracuse were to get a guy like Kaidon Salter, as I explained on yesterday's podcast, you got to rebuild the system. You got to make it so that it's designed for him. Because if you don't, it's like putting a square peg in a round hole. It can't do it, okay? How about floor-ceiling combination? Conner Weigman and Kaidon Salter, in my opinion, they both have a very similar ceiling. And that is, I think, if both achieve their potential, both of them are all ACC caliber quarterbacks. We saw what Kaidon Salter did in 2023 when he had 44 combined touchdowns. Conner Weigman, a former 5-star guy who was really, really effective in limited playing time from 2022 to 2023. Both of them have potential to be all ACC. But I think that Salter actually has the higher floor. Because we've seen Conner Weigman at his worst. 800 yards in 6 games, 3 touchdowns, 5 picks. Not very good. But Kaidon Salter's floor from last season, albeit it wasn't great, but the comparison I made was Thomas Castellanos from Boston College. That's the floor. That's the worst that you do with Kaidon Salter, in my opinion. And if that's the absolute worst, I think you can do a whole lot better. The only reason why I'm saying I don't want Thomas Castellanos is because there's no ceiling with him. I already know what he is. I already know he's not very good. I already know he cannot elevate a team. So if you get Kaidon Salter, that's the worst case scenario, though. The best case is what I just said with Conner Weigman as well. He can be all ACC. Castellanos can't, but those two can. However, Weigman has the lower floor where he would be unplayable. You can't play a quarterback who's going to throw you 800 yards in 6 games, 3 touchdowns to 5 picks. Can't do it. That's not acceptable. Years of eligibility, though, it favors Conner Weigman. He's got 2 years. Kaidon Salter, 1 year. I'm glad I'm not paid to make this decision if this is what it comes down to. I'm a podcast host. I get to just give my opinion, sit and react to what happens, and I don't have to deal with the repercussions. Maybe as a fan I do, and we ourselves as fans do, but I don't have to worry about getting fired if they choose the wrong guy or being wrong. I'm just glad I don't get paid to make this decision because it's really, really difficult. It really is. If I have to give an opinion, though, I prefer Kaidon Salter slightly more. And I think it's because of the higher floor than Weigman. That's the only reason. All things being equal, I want the guy for 2+ years. But I think that Salter, in terms of ability, gives you a higher floor with the same ceiling as a Conner Weigman. And so that's why I very, very slightly lean towards Salter. So it's like 51-49. I had a really hard time deciding, but I had to pick. I'm not paid to make this decision if it comes down to it. I just get to sit and eat popcorn and record a podcast. It's great. It's like the best job in the world. I'm so lucky. As far as what is coming up on the podcast tomorrow, I'm bringing back a good old friend of ours. And we're going to be respectful. Okay? Tyler Budge. You may have remembered him. He was the one who said that Kyle McCord before the year was the 11th best quarterback in the ACC. Ooh. Yikes. You might want to take that one back, Tyler. Ooh. He's coming back. We're going to be respectful, but we're going to have to let him know. That's all I'm going to say, okay? I think that's coming up tomorrow, all right? I'm scheduled to talk to him at noon tomorrow, so hopefully that works out well. And then, this is guaranteed. Syracuse basketball is playing Albany tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. So there will be a full post-game reaction. And please, Syracuse basketball, I'm not asking for much. Can you just beat Albany? Please? That's all we want. Just beat Albany, okay? So that's what's coming up on the Locked On Syracuse podcast. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. If you really liked it, subscribe to the channel. Turn on those notifications so you know right away when I am dropping the next podcast. And I will see you all again tomorrow.